welcome back. And it's my pleasure to moderate the last panel. And it's also my pleasure that for the first time so far in this conference, we're actually ahead of time. So we're not rushing to catch up the time, so hopefully that will allow us to have a good discussion here. All of the discussions are very, very important, but this one I see as being particularly important because the ICIC has a current strategic plan which lasts from 21 to 24, so it comes to an end at the end of this year. And I'm not a member of the ICIC, so I don't know the internal discussions and procedures there, but I presume that there are some discussions already about what the next strategic plan, or there will soon be those kinds of discussions. And of course, the topic of our panel is exactly related to that. What should the ICIC be focusing on? So. I think it's a very important discussion, and we're going to try to maintain a different approach on this panel than the other ones have been. What we're going to do here is each speaker will have 5 minutes to make their introductory comments. Then I'm going to moderate a discussion among the panelists. So, and I really encourage people to be interactive, to respond to each other. I will lead the discussion as the moderator, but please, as we discussed previously, if you have something to respond to what somebody else says, jump in and do that. So hopefully it'll be interactive. And then, we will hope to have a decent period of time for interventions and comments from the floor. Obviously, the strategic planning process is relevant to all of us, those of us from civil society. This is a very important institution for us, and we want it to have a strong, solid, well-prioritized strategic plan going forward. And for you as commissioners, this is your peak level body, and it's very important that it does, it does what you think is important. So I'm not, like most of the other moderators, I'm not going to spend a long time introducing people. The bios are on the website. Probably most of you know most of us already anyway. I'll leave the discussion to the panelists, but I just would like to kick off with one thought that I had, I had discussing with some people last night. And I have personally invested quite a lot of time and effort into trying to promote the independence of commissions and commissioners. As you know better than I do, it's an absolutely key part of your ability to operate effectively. If you're not independent from government, you can't oversee government, just like courts that are not independent can't do their job properly either. This value is also very well established in international law. It's not just something that is kind of practical. It's a fundamental part of international law. I would say that it has always, in the 25 years I've been working in this field, it has always been challenging to establish and maintain independent commissions. That's never been an easy thing. But I think we're facing stronger headwinds today than ever before. Even in my own country, Canada, our federal commissioner said yesterday, her office is independent, but her budget process is not independent. She's dependent on the government to allocate her money. So, he who plays the piper calls the tune. That's not full independence. And we have seen unprecedented attacks in many countries on the independence, even of commissions which used to be very independent. And I see Blanca nodding next to me, and unfortunately Mexico is one of those countries. So I really think that the role of the ICC as your collective body in promoting and sustaining independence should be something to think about. Okay, with those introductory comments, let me go now to the panelists, and we'll do one round, as I said, with questions. And starting with Blanca, you've been the chair of the ICC for some time now, so you have a special perspective on the organization. Looking at it from that point of view, how do you think the ICC should advocate for stronger international policies and standards on the right to information going forward?
Thank you so much, Toby. Muchas gracias también, Pansy, Andrew. Darren. En esta mesa, en efecto, uno de los temas que buscamos es ver el futuro de esta organización de comisionados de información de cara también a lo que estamos enfrentando en diversos países, que es el cambio de autoridades. Tiene que ver esto en función de las tareas sustantivas que, como bien señala Toby, tienen que estar sustentadas en la autonomía, en la independencia y sobre todo en el marco legal que caracteriza a cada una de las instituciones que representamos. Que si bien es cierto, existen distintos modelos en los países que representamos, algo que coincide en todos ellos, en estas instituciones y organismos de defensa del derecho a la información, es que tienen como centro al ciudadano. Gira alrededor de las personas el trabajo que nosotros hacemos para brindarle conocimiento público y para darle también herramientas que permitan potenciar y utilizar otros derechos. En ese sentido, y escucho con mucha atención lo que tú refieres, cómo mantener la independencia, cómo mantener la autonomía, y va ligado justamente también al papel que tienen estos organismos internacionales como ICIC, porque por un lado, en la medida en que conocemos otras realidades de operación en otros países, esos modelos nos sirven también para buscar adoptar ciertas características y para que esas experiencias puedan ser aprovechadas dentro de la ICIC y dentro de los grupos de trabajo que debemos de fortalecerlos. Me parece que desde el 2018 que tuve ese primer acercamiento con ICIC y que fue precisamente aquí con Pansy en Johannesburgo, en la reunión que tuvimos, teníamos las coincidencias de buscar respaldar al resto de los organismos que han tenido problemas quizá para su operación o a otros nacientes que son más jóvenes, otras instituciones que se han ido creando en otros países, y en ese sentido el saber que existe una institución, digamos, a nivel global, una conferencia de comisionados que compartimos visiones, objetivos y también actividades específicas en defensa de los derechos humanos, es clave. Por otro lado, me parece que es muy relevante que algunas de las organizaciones internacionales, los organismos internacionales como la UNESCO y muchas otras que han estado siempre presentes respaldando el trabajo, acompañando y abonando en ello, es importante mantener esas alianzas con periodistas, con organizaciones de sociedad civil, con organismos internacionales y, por supuesto, en la agenda global que tengamos como prioridad el estar atentos de lo que pasa en otros países, el respaldar, el pronunciarnos y el acompañar el trabajo que hacen otras instituciones. En esta primera ronda yo quisiera dejar esta reflexión de que la Conferencia Internacional de Comisionados de Información debe de tener un protagonismo importante en nuestros países y debe de mantener de manera permanente su vinculación con organismos internacionales que defienden derechos humanos. ¿Y cómo defender nuestra independencia? Esa se defiende en el día a día cuando justamente ponemos en el centro de nuestras decisiones a las personas. Muchas gracias.
Oh, thank you so much. It looked a little bit like we were colluding because I didn't actually know that Blanca was going to talk about independence when I queued up that point. But I think you made some very important points there. There are a lot of powerful actors, UNESCO, the ICC itself, that can support you, but you also need a coalition of actors, at your national level and even internationally. So, for example, when your commission came under attack, I organized a statement by international actors, and I think solidarity in this space is very, very important. So, thank you very much for those comments. Pansy, over to you. And part of the wider role of RTI, these days is to promote a free flow of accurate, reliable, and credible information. So, we assume that the government information meets those qualities. But our information environment is changing very rapidly, and a huge current challenge, which has come up several times already in this conference, is disinformation and misinformation and the threats they pose to the broader concept of what we might call information integrity. And from your point of view, as somebody who's been very closely involved, I got all this tech, but I don't really know how to use it. Information integrity, my own integrity here. Anyway, from your long-standing position, not only with the ICIC, but as a founding leading light of ANIC, the African network, what role do you see the ICIC playing in information integrity?
Thank you very much, Toby. And as you have said, technology has had a positive impact on the exercise of the right of access to information, but it has also had negative impacts in the form of misinformation and disinformation, which are a threat to democracy, but also a threat to elections. I've just come from, we've just had elections in my country, and disinformation and misinformation was a huge issue. So this has led to the global movement of information integrity, which is a concept from which arises from technical information security. By this we mean that information has to be accurate, it has to be trustworthy, and it has to be reliable. And we know that this concept of information integrity is now used in the wider information ecosystem to address problems of disinformation and misinformation. Now, the G20, for instance, will be convening, Brazil will be hosting the G20 in November. And the theme in Brazil is information integrity. And there is no doubt that the concept of information integrity is gaining momentum globally. Now the question is, what should the ICIC do? Before I even talk about the ICIC, what I should also say is that we, ANIC, which is the African Network of Information Commissioners, we held our annual general conference or assembly in May. And at that conference, we adopted an outcome statement at the end of that conference. And the theme of the outcome statement is the role of access to information oversight bodies or commissions in advancing information integrity in Africa. Obviously, the concept of information integrity is very wide. It includes quite a lot of things. But I think that it will be a sad day if this movement, which is gaining momentum, is forging ahead without the voice of the ICIC as commissioners who are custodians of access to information. So within that wide concept of information integrity, I think it is important for us to look at our role, to see what role is it that we can play within our mandates to advance information integrity. And I think that if I have to be bold and just put up front a recommendation, I think that going forward, we should probably look at the possibility of establishing a working group in the ICIC, which will look at the issue of information integrity and the role of information commissioners, or the ICC, in advancing information integrity. And this will obviously strengthen the global agenda on this topic. Our voice, our voices will be very, very important. But in looking at this, if I still have a few minutes, how many minutes do I still have? 2, yeah. In dealing with the issue of information integrity, we should not just look at issues of disinformation and misinformation. We should tie that with the conversation that started yesterday about open data to promote transparency. When we talk about open data, we focus data only on data which has to be made available by governments. And from where I sit, I think big tech is becoming more powerful, if not more powerful than governments, in terms of the data that they hold. And this data that they hold, they get it from everyone, actually. And they use it, they monetize it, and they are not accountable for that data to anybody. And they can make that data available, not only for research purposes to deal with disinformation and research, disinformation and misinformation. They can also make it available for developmental purposes, as Thengiwe Dube said yesterday. So this is one issue that we also have to look at. We cannot continue to be looking only at governments because, as I said, big techs are becoming, or are in fact, more powerful than governments when it comes to issues of the data that they hold. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Penzi. And I mean, I think, you know, you really highlighted, I mean, this information integrity issue is a large, complicated business. It goes way beyond just mis and disinformation, information security, and also harnessing you know, information for public goods as well as for the sort of negative things we see swirling around. And obviously some more thought and research and study would need to be given to that to figure out exactly what the best role of the ICIC would be in that space, and a working group might be an excellent vehicle for doing that. And many thanks to both of the first two speakers for keeping to the time that we had agreed. Let me now move on to Andrew. And Andrew, I mean, apart from me as the moderator, you're the only external, non-commissioner actor on this panel. So not currently with an oversight body, although you have that history as well, unlike myself. But from that external lens with your current hat, you know, how can we ensure that going forward, the ICIC, or how can the ICIC ensure going forward that it remains able to meet the challenging needs and expectations of all stakeholders in this space? Please go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Toby, and thank you to the Albanian Information and Data Protection Commissioner for inviting me here to speak at the conference. I originally misread the brief for this and thought we were going to be talking about the future of these gatherings, and so I was going to talk to you about how do you plan a good conference. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Instead, we're here to talk about what's the future of the ICIC as an institution, and to think about the ICIC's next strategy. And all strategizing begins with an environmental scan. As Maria Gracia Andia said yesterday from Buenos Aires, we're all part of a group in a situation of vulnerability. Last week, the news reported that rising sea levels had led to the evacuation of 300 families from an island in Panama. And the question arises as to whether the Micronesian countries that Toby mentioned yesterday will get their RTI laws before they have to evacuate. And it doesn't just affect small island countries like Bermuda and the Maldives, it's going to affect all of us. But strategizing also requires us to reflect on our objectives and whether they're still the ones we should be aiming for. All RTI laws are a means of shifting power from those who hold information to those who don't. And one of the reasons we're still talking about the same issues here as at the first open ICIC in 2005 in Mexico is that shifting power is a continuous struggle. Bureaucratic and political power fights back. And one of the issues that we're still talking about is how to create a culture of openness. Now, I don't want to depress anyone, but with the current approach, I don't think we're ever going to see a country achieve a culture of openness. Why is that? The answer, I think, is that a lot of the discussion in our editions of the conference and in the ICI's own documents talks about enabling accountability or achieving it. And accountability is absolutely vital. I am the last person to diminish its importance, not just to individuals, but also to civil society, commissioners, and the more or less democracies that we live in. In addition to the emphasis placed on in the ICIC Charter, 44 countries specifically mention accountability as a goal in their RTI law. But we'll all be aware of how those in power game or try to dodge accountability, often even when RTI has exposed the problem. As Monsieur Le Sen from France yesterday put it, reactive openness can be antagonistic. And a focus on accountability inherently feeds an adversarial political and media culture, which in turn feeds conflict in society. You cannot have a culture of openness when it only persists in good times, but not when difficulties arise. Here's people pushing back on action for climate change. So Freedom House reports that 52 countries experienced a decline in freedom over the last year, and the World Justice Rule of Law Index reported that civic participation dropped in 83% of countries between 2016 and 2023, and freedom of expression dropped in 78% of countries. In 2021, the OECD reported that on average, half the public say that the political system in their country does not let them have a say in decision making. So our current approach to RTI in all the countries that I know of is that it's a governance layer on top of an existing system of public administration. Enactment of an RTI law has not led to a fundamental rethink of how public policy and public administration is done. Even for the best public servants, it can be hard to reconcile the high-minded messages about RTI goals with the day-to-day responsibilities to disclose information that may make a minister angry. I do not believe that proactive disclosure alone is the answer to this, because it fundamentally puts power over the what and when of information disclosure back in the hands of those in power if we're not careful. So what do we need to think about? And the answer, I think, is about participation. 35 RTI countries, those laws I looked at, explicitly said that enabling public participation was a goal of the law. And helping to achieve this objective would enable countries to make progress on another sustainable development goal that I've long wondered why information commissioners do not prioritize, which is SDG 16.7. The UNDP's Oslo Governance Centre says that expanding the space of civic engagement and developing ways to provide people with more direct role in setting agendas can be an important factor for more inclusive and responsive governance. And as people perceive they have a greater role, it leads to better confidence and trust in a democracy and in government. It leads to better public policy outcomes, higher political participation, and reductions in corruption. A good place for commissioners to start with this comes from Principle 10 of the Rio Earth Summit from 1992, way back in the dim, distant past. And Principle 10 said that countries cannot tackle environmental issues that they face on their own, and that they need the help of the public in order to do that. But if the public were to play their part, they would need to be empowered with 3 rights: a right of access to environmental information, a right to participate in government decision-making about environmental matters, and a right to justice to uphold those first 2 rights. This principle led to the UN's Aarhus Convention, which has 47 countries signed up to it, and the Escazú Agreement in Caribbean and Latin America, which has 24 signatories. If your country is not already a party to the convention or the agreement, I think civil society and commissioners in their country should work together to try and persuade their government to sign up to these. Albania ratified the Aarhus Convention in 2001, which is perhaps why the Prime Minister in his speech yesterday said that we must promote a culture of transparency in government, emphasizing participatory governance. So, what might the ICIC do in its future strategy? I think it might want to include public participation in its vision, mission, and values. I think it might want to amend the ICIC goals to include modeling good practice on participation, and that links to its current strategic priority 4. And the ICIC should model good practice on participation by including civil society and ICIC working groups, as well as building connections to the UNDP's Oslo Governance Centre to discuss work on SDG 16.7. The Sustainable Development Goals apply to all countries. We are all developing countries as far as the SDGs are concerned, and it has long been clear that participatory development leads to better outcomes. So it makes sense to me to see RTI as a tool for participatory development, and that commissioners have a key role in enabling this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't think you even took the full 2 minutes. But no, I mean, I think it's really important to bring us back to Principle 10 of Rio, which of course, was one of the very earliest international statements about access to information, but did, as Andrew pointed out, connect it to some other values, particularly participation and access to justice. And I mean, Andrew communicated to me the results that he found from our RTI rating of the benefits that were mentioned in the various RTIs around the world. And I was a little bit surprised to see how low those levels were. From 140 countries, you know, quite a few of them aren't mentioning much. And I think that some very concrete suggestions for how the ICIC might incorporate that. So thank you so much. Darren, we had some interesting pre-conference discussions where you raised a number of both opportunities and challenges for globally facing RTI. From among the wider package of those, what would you like to highlight as priorities for the ICIC going forward?
Defeated by technology. There we go. Thank you very much for that, Toby. I think when we're looking at priorities and strategic priorities of the ICIC, a good starting point is to look at what are the common challenges that we're facing as regulators in this sphere, and explore those areas where other regulators are experiencing similar issues, and then doing the second point, which is to determine if, and if so, what can the ICIC do to add value to those discussions. I don't think it's enough just to have discussions about topics that are of interest to each other. We have to look at what are the concrete outcomes and value added that we're going to achieve through the International Forum of the ICIC. And whether that be a report, a collection of best practice, a statement helping to develop the international norms, or a development of principles or other tools for members, we have to have one eye very clearly on that output and what we think good is going to look like. And looking at our discussions over the past 2 days, it's clear that there are a number of common challenges faced by many systems. The first I'll mention is artificial intelligence, and that's an area certainly that's not only topical, but one that would benefit, I think, from being examined from an access to information perspective, as well as all the other perspectives that are looking at it. As Giuseppe Busia discussed yesterday, how can we capitalize on its benefits while mitigating the risks and addressing the challenges that it poses? Now, transparency on how artificial intelligence is used by public authorities in making decisions and providing services is something that directly impacts on people, and that's something that access to information can help empower people by seeing how that is done. Consideration of its use in pushing out information, as was mentioned by Jaco yesterday, how people can benefit from the technology both proactively and reactively, and how it can be used by us as regulators to check compliance with duties such as publication duties or in collecting and collating performance data. There are a number, of course, of practical and ethical areas where a clear international ATI voice would add value. Safeguards, accountability, which has been mentioned, how to avoid built-in bias, and the potential need for there to be a person in the loop when fulfilling legal obligations and duties as they arise. Moving on to another area, much has been said about the importance of information for all, including people in vulnerable situations. And that's an area where we've already got a working group. We've heard the report today, which is very helpful in pushing forward practical solutions for regulators to improve how they reach people in vulnerable situations. I won't repeat it, but it's clear that the work is of considerable value, and there's a clear importance in continuing that work with a focus on helping members address inequalities within their own systems. Another matter discussed is the use of non-corporate channels of communication by public authorities, a process by which was certainly existing before the pandemic, was accelerated and exacerbated by it when decisions were being made remotely and at pace. But linked to the use of the non-corporate channels of communication is the increased risk of key information about decisions being lost and not being recorded in official systems and then being deleted. So integrity, information integrity issues arising from that. And that's an area where I think the ICIC can again add value, either on its own or in cooperation with other international bodies, such as the International Council on Archives, providing a strong international voice which can help members in their own jurisdictions. But not only new issues are worthy of looking at. I mean, there's the old chestnut of public services being delivered by non-public bodies, which is still a very real and growing barrier to access to information in many of our jurisdictions. And just because it's been there for a long time, I think that just shows it's not something we've really got a solution to. So it's an area that would benefit from real discussion about it and looking at success stories, looking at those jurisdictions where workable systems have been put in place to resolve that issue. So they're just some of the examples and suggestions. The crucial thing is for us to have this discussion, to come together to consider how we as an organisation can help our members to strengthen access to information for the benefit of all.
Thank you so much. I was expecting an eclectic presentation from you, and I didn't realize it was going to be quite so wide-ranging. A lot of very important issues that you raised there, and that hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to discuss among ourselves now. Let me start for the discussion part. Andrew, I would say exactly threw down a gauntlet, but almost did that, and he kind of suggested that we need to really refocus our efforts on the relationship between RTI and participation, that participation is somehow at the key of all of this, and I think he was talking not only about the need for the ICIC itself to be participatory, which I think you've done fairly well at, actually. I think involve civil society reasonably well, and not perfectly, but also in the broader sense of that. I don't know if people have some thoughts and comments on that idea. Just turn it on. Yeah, it's just the bottom one.
Hello. So I stuck up a couple of suggestions on the last slide and raced through them. But I think one of the things that the ICIC as an institution could consider is about involving civil society in some of its working groups that reported this morning, particularly when you're talking about vulnerable and marginalized communities. That's an area where civil society does a huge amount of work, and of course the disability community for decades has had the slogan, "Nothing about us without us." And I think that it's possible either maybe the executive committee of the ICIC stays commissioner only. You, of course, need a space of your own, but it's possible, say, to have quarterly meetings with CSO stakeholders with the executive committee. I think there are other ways in which the ICIC itself can be smarter about using technology to involve people between these conferences and between Zoom meetings of your colleagues around the world. There are technologies such as Polis, which is for deliberative decision-making, has been used in many countries around the world now, Taiwan is a leading example, and also another platform that I've just used with a little CSO in New Zealand called Consider It, which allows you to seek comments and feedback on a draft strategy document, for example. So there are multiple opportunities for the way that the ICIC as an institution could involve people. But I want to go back to one thing Darren said earlier about what value do these conferences add. I had the job of organizing this conference in Wellington in 2007 before the ICIC was established as an institution. And we said that we wanted all speakers to provide a written paper. And from that conference, we've got 800 pages of commissioners' wisdom and civil society wisdom that's now up on the ICIC website. But I think as a community, you're not building knowledge to pass on to new commissioners when they take office if conferences like this don't build up that body of recorded knowledge.
Thanks. I have to say I gave pause of thought to whether to go to New Zealand. Not only you want me to go halfway around the world, but you want me to write a paper? No, I think those are very good suggestions. So let me throw that now to, I mean, those are some quite challenging suggestions. I have to say, when I was listening to some of the presentations of the working groups, I had exactly the same thought. You know, the one looking at legal decisions and laws and things. And I mean, you know, my own not to be self-promotional, but my own organization could certainly play a role in that working group. Do those things sound like ideas that you know, these panelists, without making a decision for ICIC, would support, would endorse? Yeah, well, anyone. Go ahead.
I'm not talking on that.
Are you not talking on that? Darren, Blanca?
Yeah, I think there's certainly room for wider obtaining of knowledge, of looking to experts to help guide us in various fields, not only with regard to civil society, but as I mentioned, the opportunities of working with other international organizations where our jurisdictions overlap. And I think that wider discussion, when Andrew mentioned participation, I've always viewed access to information as the great enabler of participation. But of course, you've then got to have the mechanisms in place to do the actual participation itself. But many of our jurisdictions are bound legally to the access of the information. It's that enabling core, absolute key enabling function, which then allows people to use it to engage if they wish to. They might not want the information for that. They might want the information for a myriad other reasons, but they may wish to have it to participate and to take part in that. And that's where there might be room for wider liaison with bodies like the Open Government Partnership, to have a greater links between those organisations. But I think it's also important for us to understand our part in that puzzle, which is the pushing of the open access to information, to get the information out there, to empower people in that, and then to liaise with other bodies to help build up that wider participation piece.
Yeah.
I agree totally with both of you, and with my new found pet subject of information integrity. I think that is also necessary for us to open the space to collaborate with institutions that deal with this topic, of course, and emphasizing that within our mandate, and opening up a space for meaningful participation of civil society, as Andrew has said, and that can only enrich us. But I think talking about, and I'm now changing the topic, talking about accountability, I don't see how in this digital age that we live in, we can talk about accountability without bringing big tech and social media platforms into the discussion. And maybe this is an uncharted terrain for most organizations sitting here. But South Africa is one of the few countries globally where access to information law applies to private bodies and to political parties recently. And we have seen the utility of that, because we are beginning to receive access to information complaints lodged against big tech companies. As I speak, we have complaints against all of them for access to information. And some of those complaints related to their policies, their budgets, on how they deal with disinformation and misinformation. And this was within the context of elections. And going forward, can we still have a situation where ATI laws only applies to government institutions? Are those ATI laws fit for purpose in the digital world in the digital era? Maybe that's the conversation that we must begin to have as well as
thanks.
ICIC.
Thanks. I was hoping for some radical ideas on this panel, and I'm getting them. I mean, well, there you go. I mean, there has been a lot of movement at the national and also international level on transparency obligations for the big tech companies. The European Digital Services Act, for example, places very specific and quite extensive obligations on them, and UNESCO's internet guidelines for regulating platforms also talks a lot about specific kinds of transparency obligations, but this broader idea of putting them completely under the act, that's a much more radical idea. Blanca.
Sí, en efecto, va vinculado lo que refiere Tony al mar de desinformación en que estamos envueltos, en la era digital, en que estamos interconectados. Ciertamente tenemos un mundo de información que no necesariamente está verificado y esto nos genera confusión sobre esos esquemas de rendición de cuentas al que están obligados todos los gobiernos. Por eso yo creo que los esfuerzos que se han dado en organismos internacionales, hoy presentes aquí, la UNESCO, Banco Mundial y también la OCDE, que en distintos momentos ha acompañado estas organizaciones de transparencia de países de América Latina y de otros países en el mundo, juegan un rol clave, porque no solamente posicionan en su agenda global temas que hoy son una necesidad de nuestras democracias, como lo puede ser la transparencia pública, la apertura de información. Esto va vinculado también al trabajo que viene haciendo la ICIC como una plataforma única, digamos, donde podemos interactuar, comisionados de información, y donde podemos crear también una serie de mecanismos que nos permitan institucionalizar eventualmente no solo las encuestas o aquellos estudios de caso o experiencias o casos de éxito que tenemos en nuestros países, sino también cómo nos constituimos en una voz internacional que haga eco de los problemas, de los dilemas, de los desafíos, de los retos, pero también de las soluciones que podemos emprender. En la medida en que esto va creciendo en la demanda para que nuestros gobernantes atiendan en la agenda prioritaria el tema de la transparencia pública, en esa medida también nosotros podemos seguir garantizando a la población en general un derecho a conocer, a saber, a exigir y a pedir información. Ahí está la clave en un año electoral, insisto, para la mitad de la población en el mundo, que el tema de la transparencia forme parte de los programas de gobierno de los nuevos gobernantes y que estos organismos e instituciones internacionales que aglutinan a comisionados de distintas partes del mundo no se quede solamente en un pronunciamiento ahora aquí en Albania, sino que realmente pueda tener eco en nuestros países y pueda ser adoptado por parte de los organismos internacionales. Cierro. Ya lo decía Pansy, el tema de la integridad de la información es clave porque es a partir de ella como se pueden tomar mejores decisiones. Entonces, no solamente centremos en que se entregue información, sino en la calidad de la información que se entrega y que ésta tenga que ver con una base de datos mínima, con un piso mínimo de accesibilidad para que ningún ciudadano se quede atrás y pueda llegar incluso a aquellos grupos vulnerables como son discapacitados, como son grupos indígenas y como son aquellos que no tienen acceso a las nuevas tecnologías.
Waiting for the translation delay. Very, very important points. And of course, 20% of the population of the world just had an election recently, and they're getting the results today. That's one country, India. So it's quite an exciting thing there. Just back, keeping for now on the issue of participation. And I don't think you raised it in your comments just now, but you did put it in your notes, unless I missed it, Darren. This idea that we have a whole nother set of public actors the intergovernmental organizations and the international financial institutions that are part of our governance structures. I mean, they're not national governments, they're international governments. And, increasingly those bodies are adopting not access to information or right to information laws, because they don't adopt laws, but policies, which are binding policies, within their structures. And the better ones among them have put in place independent oversight bodies to regulate, complaints bodies, very similar and very analogous to information commissions. The World Bank, for example, represented by Juan Pablo, they have an independent panel that deals with appeals from requests for information, requests that went to the World Bank. What about the idea of bringing them into the ICIC family? They're very, very analogous to the rest of you, except that they operate internationally. Does that seem like an interesting idea? And I'm credit to Darren for that idea.
Yeah, I think there's importance about access to information at all levels that impact on people's real lives, decisions that are made which have direct consequences for people's lived experience. So just as I was a great proponent for the subnational voice at the ICIC, so the international and supranational access to information, while, as you've said, Toby, they might be not subject to the laws, to encourage those who don't yet have detailed policies on this, to encourage those who don't have that, coming back to the point on independence, who don't have that, one step removed from the decision making if there are complaints made, then it's great to encourage them to take part, particularly if those organisations are themselves saying to countries, you must improve transparency, then I think it puts them in a much greater position of strength if they themselves are open and transparent.
I was just thinking that we probably have to bring the special rapporteurs on board. Special rapporteurs that deal with access to information. The African Commission, the UN one, the Inter-American one, and the European one. Because during my tenure as a special rapporteur in Africa, we used to work together as the 4 special rapporteurs. And we adopted those days, you'd remember, Toby, joint declarations. And this was very, very effective. I think if we bring them into the room, so that they also benefit from our work, because most of them are far removed from the countries which they are supposed to monitor. So I think it will be beneficial for them to be in the room in an organization like this, so that they can also have the benefit of what we are doing as information commissioners.
Yeah, just to mention that the special rapporteurs still adopt those joint declarations. The last one was launched on the 3rd of May, so just recently, and my organization continues to work with them, and Article 19 also supports them as civil society actors on that. Anyone else want to weigh in on the IGO? And I think you made a good point, Darren, in broadening it out. Many of these policies don't have independent oversight systems, and they should. And I think the ICIC can play a role in that. And many of those policies are nowhere near up to the level of national laws. They just don't. There's a kind of a wall there that they just don't accept the basic principles that are accepted at the national level. So I think there could be potentially quite some civil society groups are banging on at them, but it would be nice to have some ICIC weight behind that discussion. Blanca, you had mentioned in some of your prior comments, some of the discussion beforehand, this idea about the ICIC supporting regional leadership and initiatives in this space. Could you maybe say something about that?
Claro. Sí, gracias. Hace un momento hablaba yo de institucionalizar consultas, por ejemplo, desde ICIC. Presentamos hace un momento resultados de algunas encuestas que se hicieron donde participaron únicamente 20 países. somos más de 50 países que formamos parte de ICIC y más de 80 comisionados de información. Creo que es importante que podamos desarrollar y distribuir también recursos técnicos a partir de las experiencias de organismos que tienen más avanzadas sus agencias de transparencia y que a través de ellos también no solamente podamos compartir experiencias, compartir conocimiento, sino también buscar mecanismos de apoyo de organismos internacionales. Hace apenas algunas semanas que se llevó a cabo la red de transparencia, Pansy hablaba de la red africana de transparencia. En América Latina nosotros también tenemos distintos países que nos hemos unido para formar la RTA. Hemos buscado el apoyo, por ejemplo, del Banco Centroamericano para el Desarrollo. También la UNESCO regional ha brindado apoyo. Eurosocial ha sido también patrocinador de acciones específicas y de proyectos muy concretos para impulsar en países en desarrollo, particularmente en América Latina, algunas acciones que tienden justamente a fortalecer esto que estamos implementando. Hablamos de plataformas digitales como una forma también de potenciar el conocimiento público, de poner a disposición de la gente información en datos abiertos y en impulsar otras políticas públicas. Creo que es fundamental que a través de ICIC, ahora donde estamos todos los continentes representados, podamos llevarnos no solamente, reitero, una declaración hacia la conclusión de este encuentro, sino tareas muy específicas, la creación de un nuevo grupo de trabajo que ya ha propuesto Pansy, que vale la pena que sea estudiado por el comité directivo y que se enriquezca con la participación de ustedes. Y finalmente creo que el poder seguir incluyendo manuales, guías, planillas de respuesta a partir de los casos de estudio que ya tenemos puede ser útil para que los llevemos a nuestros países. Finalmente, creo que se pueden generar orientaciones claras y específicas en una plataforma abierta de diálogo entre países que coinciden en sistemas o formas de gobierno, tipo en algunos casos en América Latina, Unión Europea, en África, etcétera, de manera que este organismo internacional, esta organización que es la Conferencia de Comisionados de Información, pueda servir también no solamente para que podamos compartir problemas, sino también compartir soluciones y crear un mecanismo, digamos, base de que responda a las necesidades de los comisionados.
Excellent, very, very important thoughts. And Pansy, I mean, you have just been involved in, I mean, you just were at the meeting, but I mean, you were involved at the very ground floor in setting up ANEC, the Regional African Network. I mean, is there a need to explore more the relationship between the global and the regional, or you feel that that space is looked after reasonably well already?
I think that's important, and I think ANEC was established because of the support that we got from the Latin American network. You recall that we were invited before we even formalized ANEC. We were invited to their assembly, and it is after that assembly that ANEC took off. So I think that's very important. Also, that we should, especially as countries from the global south, I think we need to strengthen collaboration between ourselves and see how we can deal with issues that affect us as the global south. I mean, I can give an example: access to data for research purposes, data from digital platforms for research purposes. In countries in the north, they are able to access that data, but countries in the south are unable to do that in the global south. So these are some of the common issues that affect us as the global south. I think we need to strengthen our relationship. Thank you.
And we don't have a representative from Asia on this panel. I mean, you know, there's only so many people on the panel, but I mean, should ICIC, or perhaps, I mean, in this case, this was cross-regional, which is so nice. So Latin America kind of helped Africa kick off their progress on that. I mean, should there be an effort in Asia, or perhaps sub-regionally within Asia? Andrew.
I should just say that yesterday I was invited to the meeting of the Asia Information Access Network here, and it is apparently already decided that it's willing to have civil society participation, which is great. I want to go back slightly to about how commissioners can strengthen their work through connections with others. In the second week of May, there was the annual event of the Global Conference on Transparency Research in Brussels. Can you put your hand up if you went to that conference in Brussels? This was academics talking about their research on transparency. Okay.
But what if you heard about it?
Had you heard about it? Right. So I think one of the, going back to the issue of having papers, if you've got papers generated for this conference, you've got things for academics to study. But I think also you've got to consciously reach out perhaps to the organizers of this global conference on transparency research to build connections with academics. Because although civil society are key defenders of information commissioners when they're under threat and in terms of advancing the rights, a lot of the background for academic and civil service and even political support for the right to information comes from empirical knowledge about its beneficial effects, and that they pay more attention to what they would regard as independent, neutral academics. And so I think it would benefit commissioners to build connections with the Global Conference on Transparency Research.
Great, thank you. That's certainly a good idea. And it's, I mean, I hadn't heard of it, and I guess most of us hadn't. Okay, so we now have a reasonable amount of time for inputs and comments from the audience. We've had a very wide-ranging discussion here about the possible ideas for ICIC going forward. I didn't ask the organizers whether anyone was kind of taking notes or keeping track of this discussion. I hope somebody is. Anyway, now is your chance, and please, if you have thoughts or ideas about, what the ICIC should be focusing on in the future. And yes, so we have from Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, our prudent personalities in the stage, for very well-rounded discussion. The UN decided to make an information integrated digital platform 1 year back, June in 2023, United Nations. That is why they are preparing it. That is, Madam, our former chair, Madam Pansi from the South Africa. You told about information integrity. Misinformation, disinformation pollutes the information ecosystem and which threatens the human progress, which includes hate speech, rumor, and fake news. So this is very important for us, how we shall cope up with the United Nations, because now we are working with the UNESCO, but my issue that eliminating mis, dis, and other informations, we have to work seriously for quick and accurate time-bound intervention through the government or through the proactive disclosure. My issue is, as a also member of ICIC, for sustainable ICIC, it is my proposal. I to be work with the United Nations, because they have started already information integrity on digital platform. They are formulating it, and it will come, the result will come very soon. So this is one point for our ICIC sustainability and others. And I think these are my main points, because our house already tuned about these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we only have one roving mic. So over here, put your hand up so she can. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of actors doing a lot of things in the broad notion of the information integrity space. So the ICIC is going to have to, no, up here, please. But yeah, the ICIC is going to have to think very carefully, what its focus, who it's going to work with. You can't work with all of them, I'm sure. Please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Toby. I think I must agree with the panelists on a number of areas where panelists are suggested. But I have a bit different view on what we should expect from ICIC in coming days. And also we have to accept two facts. All the commissions, information commissions in their country, they are fighting their own fight or struggling to implement RTI in their own jurisdiction. They are fighting. And then second point is, without having 1610.2, we wouldn't have the speed, the number of countries have adopting this legislation has increased at such a speed. Without that, it was not possible. Two facts. And since we are fighting our own fight in our countries, what we should expect from ICIC is in coming days is ICIC's influence should increase or strengthen in coming days. Through what? Through number of UN agencies or multilateral organizations. We should be able to participate in those organizations and put the ATI agenda in their agenda, so that it will get more global influence on implementing RTI by countries or governments. Without that, because the commissions in their own countries may not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. That's only one suggestion.
Thank you. And back there, please. Yes. Keep your hand up so she can. Yeah, I mean, I think that yesterday the issue of, whether we're going to retain something like 1610 and 1610.2 in the next iteration of the development progress, whatever it may happen to be. I mean, I think the ICIC should already, the civil society folks and other people, supportive governments can play a role, but ICIC should already be thinking. That seems to me like a natural part of your territory, really. Yeah, well, should we have one more question and then responses?
Yes, thank you. The issue on this independence of the oversight bodies that Blanca Ibarra touched on, I think is very important. Yesterday there was this question of political will that was mentioned by one of the panelists. I think in addition to what Pansy just said, that we should use very effectively the rapporteurs at the regional level, to push for governments to really not only push for the adoption of the law, but I think what is more important is the implementation, because we have a lot of challenges, particularly in Africa and Asia. There are countries that have adopted the law, and it's taking much longer for the law to even set up the oversight bodies. It's taking much longer. And I don't think this is good for the implementation. And this is a very huge challenge. Where we have also some countries where they have implementing the law, but because of the lack of independence of the oversight bodies, it's really causing a lot of problems. So probably ICIC maybe can work with global institutions, global bodies at the UN level, like the UN ECOSOC. There could be a possibility, and also lobby even countries that are sitting on the, as part of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. We have very important members of the ICIC who are also, whose countries are also sitting on, as permanent members of the Security Council. So I think there is a lot that can be done at the regional levels, but also at the global level, to really try and push. And I think the membership of the ICIC also, by now, we should be expecting to have more members, but it's really, so probably if we really forge a very strong partnership with institutions like the UN ECOSOC, working with the big countries that are really big players, and even UNESCO. UNESCO can also be a very important partner in this because they are part of maybe going beyond their monitoring and reporting on SDG 1610. For instance, in Africa, we have many countries that are going to take part in the VNR this year at the UN high political level meeting to contribute, and Sierra Leone is one of them. And also, I would like to say that at the moment, Sierra Leone, my country, is a non-permanent member of the Security Council. So we can use, we can leverage, opportunities like this to be able to see how best we can really put across our message to at the highest level of the United Nations General Assembly, and of course even the UN Secretary General and the other members of the UN. Okay, thank you very much. Because we really need to increase the visibility of ATI. For now, I don't think, probably we have done a lot, but there is still a lot of room for improvement. Particularly looking at the information integrity that Pansy mentioned. This is a very important thing because there is lack of political will to proactively...
I'm going to ask you to wrap up a little bit because we have some more questions.
There is a lack of political will to proactively disclose information on a lot of public authorities, and that is really causing a lot of problems. So probably by encouraging member states to really not only adopt the laws, but also push for the implementation, that will really help. Thank you.
Okay, I already have a couple more questions, but I think I'm going to have some quick responses from the panel, and then we'll go back out to the floor for the other questions. And Darren, you already had your hand up, kind of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a number of the points there that were mentioned about commissioners having to fight their own fights, the increasing of independence and implementation of laws. All of this ties up with something that was mentioned by Warren earlier on about the potential benefits of something similar to the Paris Principles or the Vienna Principles, of having a United Nations buy-in, if you like, to the importance of access to information regulatory bodies and general principles in relation to those. And I think having a document potentially at that level could give substantial benefits to protect similar commissioners and organisations at the national level, as well as helping establish new commissioners in those jurisdictions that don't yet have them.
Just to share practically what ANIC, the African Network, has done, we have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and with the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression in particular. And we think that that collaborative relationship will assist us to, push the ATI agenda on the African continent.
Yeah, obviously, creating these relationships is very, very important. Anyone else want to respond? Or if not, Amrita, you're going to give us a breakdown of the results from the world's largest democracy. You're guaranteed that position now because you're the largest country, but by population. No, just joking.
Yes. So just going back to, in fact, what you started the session with, I think over a period of time, for instance, even in India, we've seen undermining of the institution of the Information Commission. Right now, we are in a place where a significant proportion of our population does not have access to the appellate mechanism because there are no information commissions at all in 4 states. In one of the states, which is a very mineral-rich state and where there's a lot of mining and a huge tribal population, not a single commissioner has been appointed for the last 3 years. So you have no way to go and complain. So, and also at the national level, the Central Information Commission in the month of October was at the brink of going defunct. And just a few hours before it became defunct, the government appointed 3 commissioners, but appointed them without the leader of opposition being part of the meetings, even though that's a statutory requirement. So both in terms of non-appointment, in terms of undermining the selection process, in terms of squeezing of funding, something that we heard from Canada, also the issues that Commissioner Blanca touched upon. So perhaps I would like to suggest that maybe having a focus on the health of information commissions at each of these conferences, and perhaps even a section on the website, which is updated at some periodic frequency, would really help all of us to kind of understand where things are. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Over here. And I mean, as a civil society activist, I have to add to those things, I mean, also, you know, the possibility to intervene and to advocate. When a commission comes under attack, no, sorry, over there. When a commission comes under attack in the ways that you've just described, or, you know, a similar approach was taken in Mexico, you know, okay, Laura, go ahead.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, thank you, Toby. Thank you to this panel. My comments/questions may be a little free-ranging because the panel has offered us so much to consider. I think one thing that strikes me as we're hearing questions and what you all are saying is really the role of the ICIC. Is it just a technical body, or is it also a political body, small p? And this goes a little bit to what Darren was just suggesting of having a set of principles. And is it the role then of the ICIC to defend those principles? When one member is under attack, what is the role of the ICIC to come together as a body to protect each other's independence, each other's rights, and the right to information? So I pose that as a question for all of you. And then just a few comments. I've been texting back and forth with people who are online watching. And one thing that was asked is, where are our young warriors? Where are our young champions of the right to information? I mean, when Toby is the youngest person on the panel, no, I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Laura. I love you.
But I do think it's a question. Where's this next generation who are going to come together and support you all and support the right to information? And where are subnational governments? For those that have federal, state laws, they really also need to be brought into this. And I think at various conferences we've seen them, but really a smattering. And is it because this conference doesn't speak to their needs sufficiently, or why aren't they more a part? And a little bit of what we were hearing from India as well is really what's happening at the state level often is what matters as much to citizens as what you at national bodies are doing. So just a few thoughts, but really I would love to hear from you all about where you see your role in defending each other and defending the right to information.
Just to respond to that, I mean, I think, you know, the whole bit about young people, not just at this conference, but I mean, for information commissioners and for RTI systems, you know, how are we going to keep young people engaged and, you know, making requests and using these systems and, you know, part of our participatory framework that we're talking about. And, you know, I mean, if you don't have an app for a mobile phone, you're just not with it, you know, and I mean, I wouldn't have that app on my phone because I can't even use the timer on it, but it's an important thing to have. Jacob.
Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion, and I think UNESCO stands also with information commissioners to support them in their way forward. My first point is I think that when we look at the independence of information commissioners, we have to realize that we look at a broader context where human rights defenders overall are in a declining position. And I think one should find allies in terms of human rights defenders. Unfortunately, when we talk about human rights defenders, not always information commissioners are included in that broad term. And I think this is very important. And that means that when discussions about human rights defenders are taking place, we have to take into account the importance of information commissions. Also, just talking about alliances, there is the International Organization of the Ombuds Association, for example. There are other human rights defenders that I think that it is important to broaden those partnerships. Secondly, I do agree with Nepal that the fact that we had an SDG target related to access to information, it did put the question of access to information within the developmental agenda, and it wasn't necessarily there before. This said, we need to understand that we are crafting the post-2030 agenda, and how will we account for the role of access to information? And I think that is a question that starts now, and where information commissioners can start thinking, on the one hand, what that looks like, not necessarily a target. And secondly, there are a number of international events that are taking place that are shaping this developmental agenda. Pansy mentioned the G20 that feeds into it, but there's also the Summit of the Future. There's also the Digital Compact and other big milestones that will determine the developmental agenda. And that means that the challenge is to keep access to information part of the developmental agenda so that we have an access point. Lastly, I just want to mention that while the Vienna Principles and others are being mentioned, UNESCO did push forward the Tashkent Declaration as a document where member states took note, I think, of the importance of not only principles, but also the independence of information commissions. And a starting point, together with the other references, could be to also look at these existing tools that are on the table. Thank you.
And just a quick thought there. I mean, showing the links between, the cost-cutting links between access to information and the broader development agenda is a place where academic research is absolutely essential. I mean, we just can't do that otherwise. I'm just scanning the room. Oh, yes, one maybe last question, and then we'll do a roundup.
Thank you. I'm Juan Pablo Guerrero. I used to be, like all of you, an information commissioner 20 years ago or so. Now I am part of the World Bank, and I want to briefly share the World Bank's approach to anti-corruption to emphasize some of the questions and areas of concern that have been shared here. So on anti-corruption, the World Bank is undertaking a coalition building approach. It is clear that governments or anti-corruption bodies or civil society on their own will not be able to address such challenges. In that coalition, access to information commissions have been missing, with some exceptions, where it is true you're very much part of the architecture for fighting corruptions in your countries. But one of the reasons why I was sent here is because in many of the discussions that you just mentioned about the future of civic space, the role of young people making request informations, they're not going to file them via post or even using emails. It's going to be so different in all of those discussions, including, of course, the very important challenge of engagement and of accountability. ICIC and information commissioners playing a very important role, and I fear that so far it hasn't been up to the challenge. Sorry to be so blunt. I'm speaking more as a former colleague of yours than as a representative of the World Bank, but I see again a great opportunity giving this very timely reflection to play a bigger role. Thank you.
Okay, one last comment from the floor. Anjali over there. Just put your hand up. And then we're going to come back and have a round up here.
Thank you, Toby. Just want to say a small suggestion. I think this platform is very important, especially given the democratic decline that we are seeing in many countries. And at this kind of time, we are also seeing that other platforms which countries looked to hold their hands at this time seem to be also kind of in decline. So it's very important that at the end of each of these sessions or conferences, there is a statement reaffirming the need for the right to information, the importance of this fundamental right that goes out to all countries, especially to countries that have already passed information laws, but even to those who haven't. I think it would go a long way because it does sort of bring about some global pressure on all countries to make sure that they keep on this path. And since we are all meeting and all the commissions that participate are there, it can be a simple statement saying that, you know, how important the right to information is and why there is a need for everyone to kind of commit to this important right.
Okay, great, thanks. I think that's a very practical suggestion. I'm going to ask panelists now to respond to the comments that were made and also at the same time make any final comments they have. And Blanca, I see you have a microphone almost in your hand, so let's lead off with you.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, sin duda hemos tomado nota, creo que cada una de nuestras reuniones nos deja muchas lecciones para poder adoptar nuevos mecanismos internos. Me refiero a esta Conferencia Internacional de Comisionados de Información, que si bien se constituye como un mecanismo técnico también de cooperación internacional, debe dar un paso hacia adelante. En efecto, es creciente la necesidad de que en nuestros países haya una mayor exigencia de transparencia de los gobiernos y una mayor exigencia en la rendición de cuentas. En esa línea veo dos caminos. Por un lado, tenemos la tarea sustantiva de transmitir a la sociedad en general la importancia que tiene la apropiación del derecho a la información. Hay que empoderar a la sociedad para que no solamente haga suya esta prerrogativa que tiene de preguntar qué hace el gobierno y cómo nos rinde cuentas, sino también cómo utiliza ese derecho a la información para exigir otros derechos. Eso por un lado. Por otro lado, también de cara a la renovación del Comité Ejecutivo, creo que estas propuestas sirven para construir una guía, un plan de trabajo sustantivo hacia dónde debe ir la ICIC, hoy que está cada vez más fortalecida en todas las regiones del mundo, no solamente con los grupos de trabajo que existen, sino con aquellos nuevos que merecen y requieren que exista una línea distinta de mayor empuje. También creo que es importante la adopción de este protagonismo que debemos tener quienes garantizamos un derecho humano como lo es el derecho a saber. Hoy, más allá de que existan en nuestros países distintas modalidades, normas o leyes de cómo se configura el defensor del pueblo o de cómo se configuran los comisionados de información, en algunos casos con mayor o menor independencia, creo que los organismos internacionales, las organizaciones de sociedad civil, la academia, incluso las propias instituciones que están aquí presentes, podemos ayudar a potenciar lo que significa el derecho a la información en un mundo interconectado que lucha contra las noticias falsas, que lucha contra aquello que hoy se está imponiendo en la agenda cotidiana de la inteligencia artificial, que lamentablemente también genera grandes riesgos para la población, y mantener esta vinculación estrecha y directa con los organismos internacionales para que se lleve esta voz, esta demanda y esta necesidad creciente de fortalecer el derecho a la información en todas las regiones del mundo. Yo inicié y concluyo con algo que me parece que es muy relevante para la mitad de la población en el mundo. Los nuevos gobiernos, las nuevas autoridades deben de llevar en su agenda como prioridad, más allá de la ideología que los lleve al poder, el tema central de la transparencia en la actuación del gobierno y permitir que la autonomía y la independencia de los defensores de derechos humanos no sea trastocada. Claro que desde ICIC y desde cualquier otro organismo internacional debemos de sumar voces y de respaldar cuando en aquellos países puedan estar en riesgo los derechos y libertades de las personas. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. Andrew.
Thank you. Two quick points. First, to come back to what Laura said about where are the young people, where are new warriors. I think one of the reason I chose climate change is because it's an issue that is affecting all of the next generation. They are the most vulnerable group in many ways. They are facing an existential challenge, and about the only places where it is not top of mind as an existential challenge are places like Gaza and Sudan and conflict zones. The other area that I think, referring back to what Amrita said about documenting the vulnerability of commissioners and defending their independence, RTI laws also come under threat when governments pass other laws, new legislation, with secrecy clauses that override their freedom of information laws. Some of your laws will have what in English we call a notwithstanding clause that says the freedom of information law is the supreme law on whether you can get the information. But in many countries, they may have a system where another law can override your freedom of information law. In New Zealand, under Jacinda Ardern's government, more than 20 such laws were passed with secrecy clauses overriding our Freedom of Information Act. And my colleagues from the Ombudsman have been busy helping him write submissions to Parliament saying, you do understand that this law unnecessarily creates more secrecy. And I think the ICIC could help by documenting this as well on its website, not just attacks on commissioners, but attacks on the laws through secrecy clauses.
Thank you very much. I think we have to be deliberate about how we protect colleagues who are under attack or institutions that are under attack. And maybe it's a discussion that we must have at a policy level, a frank discussion, which I will not have in this room, so that when those issues arise, we're able to take a stand collectively as the ICIC to protect those who are under attack. But my parting shot is, if we are to remain relevant as the ICIC, it cannot be business as usual. We cannot meet year after year and talk about the same things that we have been talking about. We have to be on the cutting edge of the ATI movement, because this train is moving and we have to ensure that we catch up with it and we get on board. And that's why we have to be very deliberate that we're not going to allow a business as usual kind of way of doing things. That's my parting shot.
Hear to that. And I'm sorry, Darren, that you were last on both rounds, but please finish up.
Yeah, I mean, just following on from what Pansy said there, I think it's important that we had this discussion at the open session, that we were able to canvass views of wider civil society, as well as the commissioners, and the task really for the ICIC now is to transfer this discussion, these ideas, into concrete action, put that in our strategic priorities, and make sure that we deliver something tangible moving forward.
Thank you. You know, sometimes moderators try to provide a synopsis or a summation of the points that were made. You know, I think, and I'm usually not bad at that, but I think that would be foolhardy on this panel because there were such a lot of different ideas and thoughts. I would like to end up, though, with just one sort of maybe overarching thought. You know, I've been working for human rights NGOs for more than 25 years. And, you know, when I started back in 1994, or 1990, well, whenever, that would be 30 years. I have a math degree, but I can't, just like I can't use my phone, I can't add very well either. 1997. You know, the organization I worked for at that time and many other organizations used to come out every year and say, oh, you know, everything's getting worse and blah, 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 blah. And I just used to kind of throw up my hands because, I mean, you know, the communism was over in Eastern Europe and these countries were democratizing. One-party states were, you know, falling like you know, nine pins all over the place, and actually things were getting better. But we kept saying they were getting worse. But today, that's not the case anymore. From a democratic and human rights point of view, things are getting worse. You know, I mean, I won't put a start point on that, but, you know, those claims that we used to make, which were not correct, today they really are. And, I mean, I think the information integrity piece is absolutely central to that decline, but it's certainly not the only element there. And I won't go into all of the issues there. But, and for me, that poses both a fundamental challenge, but also an important opportunity for RTI, because those attacks on democracy and human rights are attacks on RTI as well, and we've discussed that on this panel and in other parts of this conference. But at the same time, RTI has to be a key part of the way that we overcome those challenges. And I think there's all kinds of logic to that, and there's all kinds of kind of, you know, connecting the dots ways that that's true. And so I think it's also, you know, a real opportunity for our movement. We are probably more important today than we ever have been, precisely because democracy, including our own right as part of that, is under attack. So, you know, I'll just leave that thought with you as you go forward in your planning for the next strategic plan for the ICIC. And if we could have a last round of applause for the panelists. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you, Toby. I would like to thank the panelists as well. You can actually step down officially. And again, officially, I would like to invite Mr. Besnik Dervishi, the Information and Data Protection Commissioner of Albania, for his closing remarks of this open session. Thank you very much.
Very briefly, dear all, as we conclude the open session of the conference, we recognize that the discussion and insights shared by our distinguished speakers and experts have been invaluable. We've gained fruitful insights through the exchange of experiences and knowledge. However, we have a long journey ahead to put into practice the information acquired here in Tirana, so that we can better fulfill our task back home. We hope that we have heard and learned in Tirana will serve you well in your daily work. Allow me to extend my heartless thanks to each and every one of you for your participation. We hope we have met your expectations. To conclude my words, let me wish the best of luck to the future edition of this conference and to all of you who honored us with your presence in Tirana. And now, without further ado, I would kindly like to invite the next host of their presentation, Commissioner Ulrich. The floor and the hard work ahead is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Besnik. First of all, a big thank you to our Albanian friends. You have been friendly and attentive hosts, and this is a standard, hard to compete next year in Berlin. So we brought a little movie with us. So is there a possibility to start the movie?
Psst. ICIC. Are you still in the dark about 2025? Well, let our team make it a little bit more transparent. The next ICIC will take place in Berlin, the capital of Germany. You will probably arrive here. You will stay in the heart of the city. You will see many things along the way. For example, you will see many signs of Germany's ambivalent and dark past. And you may see the monuments of the democracy that came out on top. With those first impressions, we will welcome you at the conference center. The Federal Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information and your ICIC team are eager to deliver a great experience for you. So please, enjoy this year's conference and see you in 2025.
So this is the first glimpse for our meeting in 2025, and you've seen the core of the team which will welcome you in Berlin. So Martina and Johannes, please stand up for a... We're looking forward to host you in Berlin. We hope that the participation will be as broad as this time in Tirana, and we're looking forward to feel the hospitality of you again for the rest of this day and tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And as I'm inviting up on the stage Mr. Adrian Alcala Mendez, ENICE chairman, on behalf of the ICIC chair, allow me to add that we were trying and still trying to be punctual here in Tirana, to prepare everybody to be punctual in Berlin next year. So remember that. Thank you very much. Mr. Mendez.
Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes. Prometo hablar más despacio para que los señores y las señoras traductoras puedan hacer su labor. Pues la verdad es que estamos muy emocionados de concluir esta jornada de actividad, esta sesión pública, este martes 4 de junio, aquí en Tirana, en Albania, este segundo día de trabajos de esta sesión abierta de nuestra 15ª edición de la Conferencia Internacional de Comisionados de Información. Y qué mejor manera, antes de la conclusión, de haberlo hecho con un panel extraordinario en donde se han abordado los retos que tenemos como asociación, como conferencia, repensarnos qué somos, pero además hacia dónde debemos de ir, no solamente como organización, sino también como el papel que desempeñamos, que es de ser autoridades, comisionadas, comisionados u ombudsperson. Y es así que hoy, gracias a su esfuerzo, demuestra la voluntad real de cooperación combinada con un sentido elevado de las altas responsabilidades que incumben a todas y a todos los presentes. Permítanme que rinda un cálido homenaje a la participación que han tenido nuestros conferencistas, nuestros panelistas, moderadoras, moderadores y relatoras a lo largo de esta fructífera jornada. Con este evento, la conferencia ha logrado avanzar hacia una madurez en la cooperación frente a la importancia de los múltiples retos que se avecinan. La generosidad del recibimiento y hospitalidad amistosa que nos han brindado a todas y a todos en esta hermosa ciudad de Tirana, Albania, de manera conjunta, con una organización extraordinaria, práctica y sin falla, han hecho posible que los participantes y los asistentes nos sintamos en casa, a pesar de que tenemos muchas y muchos, en el caso de nosotros mexicanos, 10,000 kilómetros de distancia, pero estoy seguro que mis colegas también se sienten en casa. Ha sido una organización estupenda y, por supuesto, quiero aprovechar el espacio para que brindemos un cálido homenaje a través de un aplauso, no solamente a la autoridad, a nuestro colega, sino también, como decimos nosotros en México, a muchas mujeres y hombres que están en el anonimato, que no se ven o que no conocemos, pero que hacen posible que hubiéramos estado en tiempo en nuestros hoteles, en el hotel, por supuesto en nuestros vuelos, y que hacen todo esto que es extraordinario. Por favor, brindémosle un extraordinario aplauso como reconocimiento a ellos. De verdad, no hubiera sido posible este encuentro sin el apoyo de cada una y cada uno de ustedes. Dicho lo anterior y con el propósito de hacer frente a los retos que nos plantea la era digital y la utilización de plataformas digitales por el impulso del derecho a la información, estoy cierto que todos nos llevamos a nuestras casas la convicción de deber continuar pugnando por la creación de mecanismos multilaterales de cooperación y concertación como lo es la ICIC, que sean abiertos, que sean dinámicos. Se planteó, como lo he dicho en este panel, el rol que debemos de jugar, abrir más espacios a la sociedad dentro de esta asamblea abierta, pero también en los grupos de trabajo. Eso será una reflexión que nosotros tendremos que hacer el día de mañana, pero que también estos espacios sean capaces de fungir como un motor de desarrollo integral y de cambio para nuestras comunidades. Para ello, y con base en lo expuesto en los paneles, en las sesiones paralelas y en las mesas de análisis, permítanme destacar 4 pilares como base de la labor de los organismos garantes en el mundo contemporáneo. Debemos de aprender a ser propositivos en ambientes cambiantes y desafiantes, a conocer nuevas y mejores herramientas que sean capaces de fomentar y fortalecer nuestra actuación, a emprender nuevas políticas públicas que sean innovadoras y que sean vanguardistas. Y por último, aprender también a ser receptivos con la población a quien dirigimos nuestra actuación. la dinámica de nuestra época exige que las instituciones públicas contribuyan a la creación de bienestar, de participación e inclusión. Por ello, es indispensable continuar en la búsqueda y puesta en marcha de nuevos esquemas de política pública que sean capaces de cerrar brechas de desigualdad estructurales que aún persisten en todo el mundo. De esta forma, lograremos apoyar a los colectivos en situación de vulnerabilidad, quienes más nos necesitan para lograr su pleno desarrollo. Niñas, niños y adolescentes, hombres y mujeres de la tercera edad, personas en situación de privación de libertad, pero también a las personas que se encuentran en situación de tránsito. Para contrarrestar los problemas que enfrentamos, no hay soluciones únicas, ni tampoco lineales. Por el contrario, debemos ser capaces de trazar estrategias y acompañarnos entre gobiernos, organismos garantes, sociedad civil, academia y sociedad en general con ánimo de cooperación y concertación a nivel global. Por ello, sesiones como la del día de hoy son importantes para trazar nuevos horizontes multilaterales de actuación. También este día es testimonio de la importancia de la creación de redes que facilitan la transparencia y la transferencia de conocimientos y experiencias, el intercambio de estas, de prácticas y la promoción de la cooperación internacional en materia del derecho de acceso a la información como herramientas con las que contamos para hacer frente a los retos que se nos avecinan. Por ello es que los organismos garantes integrantes como la ICIC estamos llamados a ser un punto focal de mejora continua con la finalidad de no solamente proponer discursos, sino también proponer soluciones sinérgicas y enérgicas que las democracias contemporáneas enfrentan. El reto que plantea el acceso a la información en la era digital exige cooperación multidisciplinaria, interdisciplinaria, multisectorial y, por supuesto, sin exclusión. Como lo hicimos el día de ayer, los invitamos a continuar con el diálogo en los diferentes foros en los cuales nos presentaremos en los meses por venir, en este año 2024, en cada región a la que cada autoridad pertenecemos. Del talento y entusiasmo con el que trabajemos, podremos conseguir más y mejores resultados. Para cerrar, me gustaría apuntar que la conclusión de este día de actividades es el fruto del liderazgo y el compromiso de todas y de todos y cada una de las personalidades que aquí nos hemos reunido. Con ello, damos muestra de una organización ávida de avanzar hacia la unidad de construcción de instituciones sólidas, transparentes, con mejor acceso a la información en favor de la ciudadanía, capaces de promover sociedades pacíficas, prósperas, más justas, solidarias e inclusivas, a las que protejan los derechos humanos de todas y de todos en cada latitud del mundo. De las exposiciones de este día me permito destacar la invitación para trabajar de una manera consciente y enérgica en el apuntalamiento de la consolidación de esquemas institucionales y legales en favor del acceso a la información sin distinción alguna. Para ello es menester avanzar en consonancia de la sociedad e instituciones públicas con la finalidad de lograr que el acceso a la información logre realmente empoderar a la ciudadanía a la vez que facilita el ejercicio de otros derechos como el derecho a la salud, el derecho a un medio ambiente sano, entre todos los derechos. Sin duda alguna, creo que coincidirán conmigo que las opiniones, los análisis y las propuestas que fueron vertidas en diversos paneles impulsarán y nos motivarán a desarrollar acciones y soluciones concretas en beneficio de las ciudadanías y de los ciudadanos de nuestras naciones. Hemos progresado de manera importante en este día, poniendo énfasis especial en la importancia de conocer nuevos temas que permitan conocer las capacidades de nuestros miembros y fortalecer las mismas al tiempo que se mejore la calidad de vida de las personas. Con base en ello, en lo planteado, es posible visualizar que las políticas públicas innovadoras en materia de acceso a la información son una herramienta fundamental para impulsar las transformaciones hacia mejores niveles de equidad, con lo cual, desde las instituciones y órganos garantes, expresamos nuestra convicción de decisión de avanzar en la solución de los problemas de desigualdad estructural. Por ello es que los invitamos a continuar con el mismo entusiasmo que hemos demostrado hasta ahora para construir un futuro más incluyente, más participativo, pero más justo también. Muchísimas gracias a todas y a todos y nos esperamos en la tarde del día de hoy, después de la comida, y también el día de mañana como último y tercer día de actividades del ICIC. Muchísimas gracias y enhorabuena por esta conferencia. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mendez. I have a lot of good news to share with you all today. Before we break for lunch, first of all, the good news is that we have an extra 30 minutes already gifted by everybody being punctual today, overly punctual, which means lunch starts now until 2:30. 2:30 is the side events. They start on time sharp, which means use this plentiful time to relax, chit-chat, finalize discussions. The side events will take place according to your agenda in 3 different rooms. You have the names already listed. Nothing has changed. Everything is in order. Another piece of very useful information for everybody, please remember that tonight at 5 p.m., after the side events are closed, 5 p.m., 3 buses, same as last night, same place as last night, will depart from this hotel to a cultural tour of our medieval site of Kruja. You cannot miss it. If you miss the bus, you miss the jewel which comes afterwards. So be aware, 5 minutes before 5, we all want you to be in the lobby area and start embarking the buses. Dress code, comfortable shoes. It's very important. We're in a mountain city, lots of cobbled street. We will visit a medieval bazaar. I'm not going to tell you anything else. Dinner will be following, and we will be outside. Remember, in order to enjoy the good, warm Albanian weather, a jacket is needed at night because we are on a mountainside. Is that all right? Do you have any questions? Lunch is ready. Thank you very much.